Well, it's official. We have the weirdest movie of the year. So, Keeper is directed by Osgood Perkins, the same guy who brought us Longlegs and The Monkey. Now, I have kind of a love-hate relationship with this guy as a director because on one hand, I thoroughly enjoy a lot of his movies. I think they have a lot of potential, a lot of really good moments, but he has still not managed to make that masterful, like magnum opus film that I just can't stop raving about. There's always some really good elements, and then there's always something that kind of loses me towards the end. So this review is going to tackle that question. Did he finally get over the hump, and did he make that film that I just think is awesome? So, Keeper. I actually managed to avoid all of the talk about this movie. I did not see a trailer. I did not read the synopsis. I didn't know anything walking into this. And because this is one of these films I just think is legitimately impossible to talk about and review without spoiling because it's that type of movie, I'm going to do a really brief review about what I like about this movie, give you my rating. Then we're going to do some spoiler talk after the rating. I'm going to give you a heads up. You can click off if you don't want to hear those. So in this film, you have this couple that goes on a romantic getaway to this secluded cabin. And while they're there, these weird, like paranormal occurrences start happening, and they have to confront a haunting past related to the cabin. That's a very generic way to describe this film. Basically, you have this woman named Liz, and she goes out with this guy named Malcolm. They end up back at this cabin for this romantic getaway. Then he ends up leaving, going away for work. She actually does something I'm going to talk about in the spoiler section, and from that point on, it gets very weird, like trippy, cerebral. She starts seeing things. She doesn't know what's real. She wants to leave. And it's just one of these films. It's like a hot box film where everything takes place at this cabin. And it's a pressure cooker movie that starts off kind of slow. And as it goes on, it starts unraveling what's actually going on here. I will say this. I was intrigued watching this film. I was really into this movie's story and trying to figure out where it was going to go. And I will say I actually didn't figure it out. So take that as a plus, at least I'll say. But like most of Osgood Perkins' movies, I really enjoyed the way he structured this film and the way he told this story. I think in the hands of another director, this could have been like unwatchably boring. But because of the way he frames shots and the way he generates suspense, I thought this movie was pretty intriguing and I was locked in for the majority of it trying to figure out where it was going. Again, huge compliment. My apologies if I'm butchering the name, but Tatiana Maslany, I believe is the name of the lead here. She's awesome in the lead role. Never heard of her before, but she was great in this role as the girlfriend who's kind of having to do so many different things here. She has to be confused and scared and at some points kind of funny and quippy towards him in this couple's relationship. I just really enjoyed her performance. And again, you're spending the majority of the movie with just her, so it's very important that she's an interesting actress, and I think she is. I also really enjoyed the soundtrack that's being played in this film. Nothing to do with the score directly related to the movie making elements, just throwback songs that are in this movie on record player and on the radio and things like that. I really enjoyed the soundtrack of this movie. I was kind of jamming. And like every single movie this guy's been involved in up until this point, I think it's a beautiful film to look at. It's framed gorgeously. The shots are unique. The use of shadows, I think the score pairs with it well. Very kind of old school. You can see where he gets his inspiration being the son of Anthony Perkins, probably growing up with a lot more older horror movies, him putting his kind of thumbprint on the modern horror, doing that same thing. And the whole thing just comes together to be a very weird, that is an important word, weird as fuck. The whole thing is an interesting and unique experience compared to a lot of the movies I've seen this year. Kudos. Walking into this movie, I really had no idea where it was going to go. And I'll be honest, as I said, I didn't actually predict where it was going to go. But the whole thing kind of had this weird, like, Universal Monsters vibe to it, at least to me, the way it was framed and the way shadows are using when things are lingering and coming onto the camera. That's at least what I believe he was probably inspired by when he did those shots. The whole thing has a very warm look to it as well, the way lights are used. And I thought there was this weird, like, monochromatic look to it because it takes place at this place in the forest. Kind of gave me vibes of Snow White or maybe like Little Red Riding Hood, the way there's these very strong reds and blues that contrast to black and white and this rustic wood. I really enjoyed the way this movie looks. I think, as I said, the way he was able to frame things made the movie really pop and stand out and be distinguished stylistically, which in the hands of a lesser director or somebody who understands film less would have just come off very monotonous and boring. But I think this movie is just a very well-made movie, I'll say once again. I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of a slow burn. I think the movie does take its time getting where it's going, but since I think the journey is enjoyable, I did not mind that. But if you're somebody who loves their endings to kind of conclude the movie in a perfect way where the ending is usually what you evaluate the film on, I think this movie is going to entirely depend on if you think where it ends up going is worth waiting for, because there are going to be people who get lost on the way there. That is not lost on me. Honestly, the only thing I wasn't a fan of in this film was like the final 5 minutes or so. I thought the ending in general was pretty good, but I thought the movie went on like 5 to 10 minutes too long specifically. Like the very ending scene, I don't think we needed any of that. Other than that, I had a pretty good time with it. I thought it was an enjoyable, unique watch, and definitely a movie I would watch again. This is, for me, probably Osgood Perkins' best film so far. So at this point, we're going to get into my spoiler talk, and I'm going to talk about what this movie is actually about, where it ends up going. So the movie starts off, you have Liz and Malcolm, they go away to this secluded cottage, and from that point on, you know something is off. It's one of these films where you have two characters secluded somewhere, and the way they act towards each other, you just know something is off between one of these characters and you cannot figure out what it is. What this movie actually ends up being and what it is, it's kind of folk horror. And I did not predict that whatsoever when I walked into it. But nope, it's old school folk horror. And that's why I think the whole like Snow White theme and the whole like Little Red Riding Hood color contrast thing really fits this movie so well out in the forest. I think the whole like ambiance of the movie is really nailed when that's what he's going for. But yeah, this couple is spending time out in the woods, and then randomly Malcolm asks her to bite into this chocolate cake and try this cake. And at the time, you know something is wrong, and seeing so many horror films, I thought they were just going to drug her character. But from that point on, Liz's character starts to like hallucinate and see a bunch of things and have flashbacks and start to visualize these weird, like monstrous entities. And from that point on, the movie gets a little bit more traditionally horror than it does just as a thriller. And I really liked it from the point it picks up when she eats the cake. I'm not going to lie though, it was weird as fuck. There was like a large section of this film, I'll be honest, I really didn't even know what was going on. When you start to get some answers and figure out why he had her eat this cake, and then you start getting these answers of what these flashbacks actually meant and who these creatures are and why they're doing all of this. At that point, I thought the movie actually came together to be pretty enjoyable, but up until that point, and I could hear a collective like, what the fuck is going on in the audience? So there's going to be a lot of people who watch this and they're just like completely baffled, and they might not even make it to the end, to be honest. But yeah, she starts seeing these visions, and then Malcolm goes away, but then the whole time she thinks that she's kind of the side chick and he has an affair going on with his wife, but he doesn't actually have a wife. This guy has immortality, and he has these weird like folk creatures that live with him in the woods in his house. So that's what he does. He falls in love with women, brings them back to this cottage, and then he feeds them to these creatures, and that's how he's supposed to live forever. But I think in the context of a horror film, especially in the way he makes films, it didn't feel like a very unique horror film, so I had a lot of fun trying to figure out what was going on in it. I really enjoyed the creature design in this film as well. When you start seeing them, they're like oddly interesting, again, like fairy tale-ish, but they're creepy. Like they're very unsettling. That's a good way to kind of describe this film in general. It's just kind of like an uneasy, unsettling watch. Well, you know something bad is going on. You know something is in the shadows, basically because of the way he frames a lot of the shots that are like slow zooms on the corners of houses, shadows lingering up in the ceiling, made me really interested in what that answer is going to be when it was revealed. Again, very throwback to the old school monster films where it goes like 90% of the runtime just kind of teasing what the monster is, and then you finally get the big payoff. But some really cool designs here. There's like 2 or 3 different looks, and I thought they were utilized in pretty cool ways. Like I really dug them. I'm not going to go into every single specific and do an absolute deep dive breakdown of how the movie is structured. I just wanted to talk about what type of film this actually is. So if you're the type of person who wants a little bit more concrete answers, because again, I didn't watch any of the marketing material to this one, so I'm not sure what they gave away and where it was supposed to be going. But if it's one of these films that hides its hand well, there's going to be a lot of people who are pleasantly surprised in what they got, like me, and a lot of people who are pissed. So that's your heads up. That's what Keeper's actually about. So if you guys do plan on seeing it, or you just got back from seeing it, that's why you're listening to my thoughts, comment down below. Let me know your thoughts on the movie. As always, like, comment, subscribe, join the channel down below. I do videos like this. I give you movie recommendations. I do all of that. So join me for those. I will see you in the next review. Peace.